Excerpt from Notes on the Bible by Albert Barnes, 1834, on Isaiah 67. The time will come, however, when Arabia, so interesting as settled by the descendants of Abraham, so interesting in the bold, active, and energetic character of its tribes, so interesting as using a language that is one of the most refined and far-spoken of the earth, and so interesting as being, in some parts at least, among the most fertile and beautiful of the earth, shall be converted to God.
Excerpt from the Wycliffe Bible Commentary on Isaiah 60, verses 4 to 7. It is quite remarkable that, in origin, all these offered treasures are preponderantly Arabian. Perhaps there is a suggestion here that Islam will someday turn to the cross.
Some believe that the house of God, mentioned in Isaiah 60 verse 7, refers to the Kaaba, which will be restored as a place dedicated to the God of Abraham. They connect this verse with the phrase, God was with the lad, referring to Ishmael in Genesis 21:20. This suggests a specific sacred location where God's presence would be particularly manifest. In other words, Abraham left Ishmael and Hagar near the house of God, the Kaaba, and dedicated them to God, as noted in Surah 14, verse 37 of the Quran. How does their argument proceed? The argument that Isaiah 60 verse 7 refers to the Kaaba and connects with the story of Ishmael in Genesis 21 verse 20 and Surah 14 verse 37 of the Quran is built on several interwoven interpretations from both the Bible and Islamic tradition. Key points of the argument. 1. Isaiah 60 verse 7 and the Kaaba. Isaiah 60 verse 7 speaks of the flocks of Kedar and the rams of Nebaioth being gathered and accepted on God's altar, followed by the glorification of a glorious house. Kedar and Nebaioth are descendants of Ishmael, which leads some interpreters to associate this verse with the Arabs, who are traditionally considered descendants of Ishmael. The glorious house is interpreted by some as referring to the Kaaba in Mecca. This interpretation is supported by the belief that Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba as a house dedicated to God, making it a sacred site for monotheistic worship. The gathering of Kedar's flocks is seen as a prophecy about future Arab worship at this site, particularly during the Hajj pilgrimage. 2. Genesis 21 verse 20, and God was with the lad. These scholars argue that the phrase suggests not only divine safeguarding but also refers to a specific sacred location. They connect this notion to Surah 14, verse 37 of the Quran, where Abraham implores, "O our Lord, I have settled some of my offspring in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house." The parallels between these texts are viewed as supporting evidence that Ishmael was situated near the Kaaba, the house of God, a place believed to be particularly infused with God's presence. 3. Surah 14, verse 37, and the sacred house. In Surah 14, verse 37, Abraham prays after leaving Hagar and Ishmael in a barren valley near God's sacred house, interpreted as the Kaaba. This Quranic passage reinforces the idea that Abraham intentionally placed his son near this sacred site, which would later become central to Islamic worship. The prayer also asks for people's hearts to be inclined toward this place, which some interpret as foreshadowing the establishment of Mecca as a center for monotheistic worship, particularly during Hajj. Theological implications. The argument suggests that Isaiah 60 verse 7 is a prophetic vision about Mecca and its significance in future worship. By connecting this verse with Genesis 21 verse 20, proponents argue that God's promise to make Ishmael into a great nation, Genesis 21 verse 18, finds its ultimate fulfillment in Mecca, where his descendants would worship God at the Kaaba. This interpretation also ties into Islamic theology, where Abraham's legacy is closely linked to the Kaaba. The Hajj rituals, including animal sacrifices during Eid al-Adha, are seen as fulfilling prophetic visions like those in Isaiah. In summary, proponents of this view argue that Isaiah 60 verse 7 refers to the Kaaba and its role in future worship by Ishmael's descendants. They connect this with Genesis 21 verse 20, God was with the lad, and Surah 14 verse 37, Abraham settling Ishmael near God's sacred house, suggesting that these texts collectively point towards Mecca as a divinely favored location for monotheistic worship.